Just a Zulu man.
Inside the final hours of history's most feared dictators. So you know history had a lot of dictators, bro. A lot of dictators. Let's see the final hours of most of them.
Beginning of history,
Of
authoritarian
some of them.
rulers have risen to power, promising order and absolute control. Some clawed their way to the top through brute force, others through cunning manipulation, but every single one of them believed they were untouchable. Reality, however, told a different story. Many of these men, who spread fear and violence wherever they went, ultimately met dark and fitting ends. It's as if life itself handed down a final judgment, not in courtrooms, but in the streets, in hidden bunkers, and sometimes even under the unblinking eye of the camera. By the end of April 1945, the Third Reich was collapsing. Soviet troops were closing in on Berlin from every direction, tightening the noose around the city. Day after day, German forces lost ground.
I
and the
don't think
capital
Hitler had a set death, bro. He went out on his own terms. He took his own life. So I don't think that's a brutal ending or anything.
itself had become nothing more than a heap of ruins. Facing inevitable defeat, Adolf Hitler withdrew into his underground bunker, where he would remain until the very end. In those final days, he gathered a handful of loyal followers, trying to project an air of command. But the truth was undeniable. There was nothing left to command. The bombardments were relentless, and every report confirmed the Soviet advance. In that atmosphere of despair, Hitler made a decision. He would not allow himself to be taken alive.
Yeah, that would have changed our views on Hitler. He just wanted to remain known as the leader that he think he was, feared, a killer, and all of that. So being captured and being seen in a humiliating state like Saddam Hussein, I don't think it was part of his plan.
In the early hours between April 29th and 30th, he married Eva Braun, his longtime companion. The ceremony, held right there in the bunker, was brief, almost like a farewell. Just hours later, on the afternoon of April 30th, Hitler entered his private study with Eva by his side. It would be the last time his aides saw them alive. When the door was finally opened, they were found lifeless on a sofa.
Yo, all of them.
Eva had taken poison. Hitler had ended his life with a gunshot. Following his orders, aides carried the bodies outside to the garden of the Chancellery and set them ablaze, to keep them from falling into Soviet hands. And so ended the life of one of the cruelest dictators of the 20th century. There was no trial, no prison. His empire collapsed under the weight of its own atrocities, and his death became the symbolic end of Nazi rule. Just days later, Germany would surrender, closing one of the darkest chapters in human history.
Damn. Some of these things were never learned in school.
Hitler's end was grim, but other authoritarian leaders would meet fates even more humiliating. The next was Benito Mussolini. By April 1945, Italy's fascist regime lay in ruins. Benito Mussolini, stripped of any real power, was desperately searching for a way out. At first, he thought of fleeing to Germany, but the roads were overrun with fighting. His only hope seemed to be Switzerland, a neutral country where he might escape. Disguised as a German soldier, Mussolini joined a convoy of SS troops heading north, with his companion
So Mussolini was Persian or German.
Clara Petacci and a handful of loyal officers at his side. On the morning of April 27th, as the convoy reached the town of Dongo, on the shores of Lake Como, it was stopped by Italian partisans. Among the prisoners, one weary, broken man drew suspicion. When his helmet and overcoat were removed, his identity was unmistakable.
Ooh,
Benito
damn.
Mussolini. He was taken to the small village of Bonzanigo, held overnight under guard. The next day, April 28th, the National Liberation Committee issued its order. Mussolini was to be executed. Alongside Clara Petacci, he was brought to the village of Giulino di Mezzegra. There, against a stone wall, both were gunned down. But the fury of the people did not end with their deaths. The following day, their bodies were transported to Milan and displayed in Piazzale Loreto.
Damn, to
A
show
grimly
everyone that he's really gone. This is humiliation, bro. It's a good thing they played it, or YouTube would be coming after everyone.
Symbolic site where partisans had once been executed by fascist forces. Crowds gathered, hurling insults, kicking, even firing shots at Mussolini's corpse before it was hung upside down at a gas station for all to see. This brutal end marked the final collapse of fascism in Italy. In the year...
What? So this guy was in Italy?
Crowds gathered, hurling insults, kicking, even firing shots at Mussolini's corpse before it was hung upside down at a gas station for all to see. This brutal end marked the final collapse of fascism in Italy. In the years that followed, Mussolini's remains would remain the subject of controversy, but for most Italians, April 28th became the day that closed the book on 2 decades of oppression. And while Mussolini's story ended in humiliation, in another corner of Eastern Europe, yet another dictator was about to face a similar fate: Nicolae Ceausescu.
Bro, I've watched so many documentaries. All these names are now in my mind, are now engraved in my mind. I already know all their names.
Nicolae Ceausescu. By December 1989, after 24 years of authoritarian rule, Nicolae Ceausescu's regime was crumbling. Just days earlier, protests in the city of Timișoara had been crushed with brutal force, leaving bodies in the streets. The bloodshed sparked outrage, and soon demonstrations erupted across Romania. In a desperate attempt to reassert control, Ceausescu staged a massive rally in Bucharest, broadcast live on state television. More than 50,000 people were forced into the palace square.
What? So they made a rally and then they forced people to attend.
At first, pre-recorded applause echoed through the loudspeakers. But then, real voices of dissent began to rise from the crowd. Confusion spread, the broadcast was cut off, and for the first time, the dictator's grip on power was visibly shaken. In the days that followed, the revolt only grew stronger. Tanks and troops were deployed to crush the uprising, but many soldiers refused to fire and instead joined the people. On December 22nd, the Communist Party headquarters was surrounded by hundreds of thousands of protesters. With no way out, Ceausescu and his wife Elena fled by helicopter from the rooftop, but they didn't get far. Forced to land, they attempted a frantic escape by car, only to be captured soon after. Hated as the symbols of a regime built on misery and repression, the couple was taken to a military garrison. On December 25th, a hastily formed military tribunal was convened. The charges were sweeping: genocide, destroying the national economy, and attempting to flee with massive sums of stolen money. The trial lasted only a few hours. There was no real defense, no appeal. The verdict was clear: death by firing squad.
Who? Bro, back then they were killing people, bro.
That same day, Nikolai and Elena were led into the courtyard. He tried to sing the Internationale. She hurled insults at the soldiers. Moments later, both fell under a hail of gunfire. Images of their lifeless bodies were broadcast on national television, a grim confirmation to the world that the Ceausescu era was over. In the months that followed, Romania began its slow transition toward democracy, closing one of the harshest chapters in its history. And while Ceausescu's fate was swift and merciless, the next dictator on our list would face a trial filled with tension.
I just reacted
Saddam
to this
Hussein.
one.
Saddam Hussein ruled Iraq from 1979 until 2003.
Yo, that's a very long time. Let me see, 10. That's a very long time. He was executed when in 2004, I think. Almost, I don't know, 20
For
something
more than
years,
2
23
decades,
years.
he built a regime defined by violence and repression. He ordered massacres against ethnic minorities, most notoriously the Kurdish genocide during the Anfal campaign, used chemical weapons on civilians, and dragged the country into devastating wars. The conflict with Iran, from 1980 to 1988, claimed more than 1 million lives.
Yo,
In 1990, his invasion of Kuwait triggered the Gulf War, which ended in the total defeat of the Iraqi army. Yet Saddam Gulf War, which ended in the total defeat of the Iraqi. His invasion of Kuwait triggered the Gulf War, which ended in the total defeat of the Iraqi army. Yet Saddam clung to power, ruling with an iron fist. After the attacks of September 11th, the United States accused his regime of supporting terrorist groups and developing weapons of mass destruction. In March 2003, a US-led invasion toppled him. His inner circle was hunted down, while Saddam himself vanished, sending only recorded messages to rally his followers. The hunt for him became known as Operation Red Dawn. Intelligence officers interrogated drivers, bodyguards, and family members until they tracked a trusted ally. That trail led U.S. forces to a farmhouse in Ad-Dor, near Saddam's hometown. On December 13, 2003, after months of searching, they found him hiding in a cramped underground hole, armed, but offering no resistance. The image of a disheveled, defeated Saddam quickly spread around the world. He was taken into custody as a war criminal and tried before a special Iraqi tribunal. From the start, he rejected the proceedings, calling them illegitimate and accusing the United States of staging a show trial. But the charges were severe. Among them, the massacre of 148 Shiites in the town of Dujail in 1982, after an assassination attempt against him. The trial was plagued by violence. Defense lawyers were murdered, and attacks outside the courtroom cast doubts on its fairness. Even so, in 2006, Saddam was sentenced to death.
Damn. So he ruled until 2003. I'm guessing after 2003 he went to hide. And he was captured. Because I know very well, I watched a lot of documentaries that he had only 2 trials. July and October. In October, that's when they told him, you are being sentenced to death by hanging. He tried and asked that since he's a military man, they should sentence him to death by firing squad, and they turned it down.
In the early hours of December 30th that year, he was led to the gallows at a site known as Camp Justice. Dressed in a dark overcoat, his hands bound, he listened to the final decree. Amid a storm of shouted insults and prayers, the trapdoor opened. His body fell, and the execution was captured in grainy videos that soon circulated worldwide. Saddam was buried quietly in his hometown. For many, his hanging marked the symbolic end of an era of tyranny. For others, it was nothing more than political theater. To this day, it's estimated that his regime was responsible for more than 250,000 deaths.
The internet.
Bro, I'm out. Recently, Maduro was captured. I wonder if they are going to hang him as well. Happened a few weeks, 2 weeks back, I think, or a week back. Wonder if they're going to execute him or what. But like, share, and subscribe. Let's go check another video.